and welcome to our second IMechE Talking Together event in collaboration with Raise and IET, which today is with David Rooms, Chief Medical Officer at Rolls-Royce, and Stephanie Fitzgerald, Senior Business Partner for Mental Health, also at Rolls-Royce. My name is Matt Stevenson, and I'm on the IMechE Young Members Committee as a young professional at Rolls-Royce and helping to develop this event. So today, we will be exploring in more detail the topic of dealing with disappointment in the professional life, particularly as a young professional, and asking both David and Stephanie some great questions which we have received around the topic. So to begin, let's give David and Stephanie a chance to introduce themselves before we start the discussion. So if you'd like to introduce yourselves, you two.
Absolutely, thanks so much, Matt. So hi everyone, those of you that don't know me, I'm Dr. Stephanie Fitzgerald. I'm Rolls-Royce's Senior Business Partner Mental Health, and prior to coming to Rolls-Royce, I worked as a health and wellbeing consultant, helping companies keep their employees happy, healthy, safe and engaged. And my background is I'm a clinical psychologist. I specialise in the treatment of anxiety disorders and trauma.
And I'm David Rooms, and I'm the Rolls-Royce Group Chief Medical Officer. I have very many different parts to my role, but one area in which I'm particularly interested is around mental health and well-being, and the real connection between that topic and industry and productivity and engagement and helping people be at their best.
Okay, yes, well, thank you very much for the introduction, and we'll move on to a couple of questions that we've received around the subject. So the first one is quite a generic question, really, about the emotions itself, and it's why do we feel disappointed, and what is the emotion?
I think in terms of why do we feel disappointment, for me, there's something that happens where it can be twofold. It can be that we had an expectation or a schema, so a way that we thought an event or something, maybe it was a conversation or maybe it was a specific event, and we have in our minds how we would like that to go. And we sort of build on that schema, we build on that idea of this is what a great event would look like, or this would be the best outcome for that conversation. And sometimes they're really well thought through, and sometimes it's just a general feeling of, I'd love to come out of that feeling this. And so disappointment tends to come when that expectation or that schema isn't met. So if something goes differently to our expectation, we can feel disappointment in that, I was really hoping for this outcome or this result, and actually that didn't happen. So we can take something really generic, like going to watch a football match, and you think, I really hope my team wins, and then, I'm really disappointed they didn't win. But if you take it in a work context, it could be you're delivering a project and you're really excited about the outcome, and you want everyone else to be really enthused and excited about it, and you present it at a meeting, and it's all a bit flat, and people are just like, yeah, sounds okay. And what you wanted was a standing ovation and a pay rise. So I think it can be when your expectation either isn't met or the reaction isn't quite what you'd go for. That would be how I'd think about disappointment.
And Steph, I guess this is a question for you really, but is that a form of cognitive dissonance? Is that sort of where, on the one hand, your expectation is this, your reality is that, and marrying those together is where the tension arises internally within your emotional sort of self?
Absolutely. So I think you have that tension within yourself, as you say, the mismatch that results in that. But also I think there can be quite a physiological response with disappointment that, again, so with that cognitive dissonance, we may have emotions and expectations that are arising and causing hormonal changes in us. So maybe a bit of adrenaline and some of the kind of happiness hormones that kick in, oxytocin and serotonin. We're getting really enthused about something, and then that cognitive dissonance kicks in around this is what I thought would happen and this is what did happen. And then you hear people talk about a bit of an anticlimax, when that adrenaline goes and you feel a bit flat afterwards. And again, that can be related, where you've had this real build up and excitement, and then actually the end result just was a bit disappointing.
Thank you very much for that. That was a good intro question, really, I think there. So do you think it's quite natural then to feel disappointed, and especially as a young professional maybe? Is it quite a natural feeling?
Well, I'll have a go at that one first. Yes, I think it's completely natural, and I think you know, people do set very high expectations for themselves, and you know, a company like Rolls-Royce, you know, what gets you in the door is that you're darn good at your job, you know, and the reason that you're darn good at your job is that you've been successful through your career, through your school career, and then you know you've gone into either an apprenticeship or university, but all the way through, it's a competitive process. You have to want to do it, you know, and there has to be a degree of drive and ambition and you know, real kind of emotional investment in what you're doing. And so you know, you then find yourself in this, you know, environment surrounded by a lot of other, you know, very smart, very capable people. And I think sometimes, you know, one's own view of oneself, where you sort of perhaps seen yourself there, and then, you know, you suddenly realize, well, everybody's around there as well. And, you know, you're you know, yourself, you have to reassess, I think, your kind of self view of each other. And yeah, I'm not an engineer, I'm a physician, but you know, I can imagine that it's a very you know, it's a very similar sort of world in terms of the training and what you go through. And you know, certainly, you know, my transition from school to university, you know, one moment you're kind of near the top of the class, and suddenly you're just another average medical student, you know, and that's a kind of it's a point at which you reassess yourself and your capabilities, and I think, you know, some people perhaps allow that to be expressed as disappointment, or they might experience it as disappointment. But I think, you know, when people are reflective and, you know, take the time to sort of understand themselves and how they fit into complex systems like work environments, then, you know, hopefully that disappointment turns into a more kind of positive and constructive emotion of, okay, well, self-improvement, continuous improvement, learning, and things like that, which are all really positive, drive our development, and make us better.
Yeah, thank you for that. And then, so kind of a bit of a follow-on really is how to deal with disappointment. So what are the emotional aspects of disappointment, and how can an individual deal with that within the workplace?
I think that's a really good question around what are the emotions around disappointment, because I think it depends in what way you've been disappointed or in what way you feel disappointed. So you could feel very let down by someone else, like an other. It could be that you feel let down by a company. It could be that you feel angry towards someone else. You know, I was really hoping you'd help me with that and you didn't, and I'm really disappointed, but actually what I'm feeling is anger. So I think for me, in terms, it's really important that you understand what is it I'm disappointed about and what has that left me feeling, because what you're left with will determine how best to process that emotion, because you process sadness quite differently from anger, for example. So I think really understanding, like, what is it I'm disappointed about? And I always think of it, if you imagine like a pie chart of responsibility, right? So if you're feeling disappointed, which bit is mine? Which bit did I do and could I do differently and or better in the future? You know, which bit's my responsibility? Which bit is someone else's? Which bit is just bad luck, you know, the universe or what have you, you know, just bad timing. So if I take a work example, you know, I can think of projects I was really excited to launch at the beginning of the year, and I'm really disappointed that they haven't, but a huge part of that is COVID, right? Like that's, so in the pie chart of responsibility, I'm not taking responsibility for that. That's, you know, a huge part of that is just natural delay, you know, people not being around, people being off unwell, etc., dealing with more important things. So I think there's definitely that understanding helps you process rather than just have to sit with that disappointment.
And you know, I think that's a great point that you make there, Steph. And certainly, you know, in my clinical experience, You know, there's this concept of locus of control, an internal locus of control or an external locus of control. And medically, people who have an internal locus of control, who own their problems rather than, you know, it's everybody else's fault, they have better outcomes. You know, so whether it's psychologically or whether it's actually, you know, medically, you know, let's say you're a diabetic. If you're a diabetic who goes, right, I'm going to understand my illness, I'm going to control it, it's not going to control me, and, you know, they have better outcomes. And the same comes with, you know, these kinds of life experiences where, you know, you encounter headwinds and road bumps and all sorts of adversity throughout your life, whether it's work or non-work. The people who are able to, as Steph's just said, you know, really kind of unpack it, understand it, and then not try to hand the problem to somebody else. It's everybody else's fault. You know, I'm kind of the victim in here. That's quite a maladaptive way to kind of deal with any kind of adversity leading to disappointment.
Yeah, that is a really good point, actually. So I say you can potentially use this disappointment, pack it down, put it in the pie chart formats, and then use that for kind of development in the future. Really, so you could use these disappointing opportunities to develop yourself from a personal point of view as well, I suppose.
Yeah, and you know, this is interesting. We were talking about this just yesterday in the people leadership team here at Rolls-Royce. You know, about the current situation that we find ourselves in. I mean, this is adversity that most people haven't experienced in their lifetimes before. And you know, we were talking about people development and how you develop people, and undoubtedly all of us are learning. You know, we're not going on a course, we're not you know, it's not like a university module that we're doing, but this is a massive life experience that we're all going through and that we're all experiencing differently, you know, depending on our different circumstances and our own, you know, previous experience. But we will grow from it. You know, you've all heard of post-traumatic stress, and Steph's an expert in the area. But there is this concept of post-traumatic growth, and you know, there's been plenty of studies that show that, you know, people who don't just survive adversity but then thrive, you know, they do have that growth mindset, and that is really important, and it's one of the ingredients to success, to career success, is you know, really taking the time to understand your own responses to all stimuli, you know, whether they're positive or negative, all situations, good or bad, and then seeing what you can learn and grow from that. There was something in the Harvard Business Review a number of years ago now, but they interviewed a whole bunch of, you know, C-suite executives, and every one of them described their period of most growth was during their periods of greatest adversity, you know, the big crisis, just like we're going through at the moment. So I think if we can harness that, any disappointments that we encounter along the way, harness it and grow from it, then that's the best possible outcome that we can hope for.
Yeah, that's a very good point there. And then this next question is actually kind of a little bit more specific. So often, and particularly when new to a team, young professionals would rather not say anything or be less vocal to avoid disappointment. And the issue is that sometimes this can be seen to stop development, as appearing as like a quiet one of the team, or, you know, not willing to fully engage in conversations. So just curious if you had any advice or thoughts on that situation.
So I guess for me, immediately my inner psychologist wants to leap in there and say that is a self-fulfilling cycle that people engage in. So if they think, I don't know, I don't want to say anything, you know, negative, where I'll be negatively interpreted, or people will think that I'm silly, or, you know, there's some fear there, and they're acting from a place of fear and anxiety. So they think, I won't say anything. Then what happens is they don't say anything, so people don't react negatively because they haven't said anything to react negatively to, and your brain thinks, oh good, okay, I'm safe. So what I'll do in every meeting is I'll never say anything, and that way I'm safe. But actually you're not safe. What you're doing is you're you're fulfilling that fear, you're feeding that fear that says, I can't say anything in meetings. So my inner psychologist says, actually challenge that thought. If you're worried that you're going to say something and be poorly judged in a meeting, say something. Then if you're poorly judged, deal with the outcome. But actually what's far more likely to say is, by saying something and engaging in the meeting, good things will come out of that engagement. And what you'll learn is, actually, I can say stuff in meetings. I can I can join in. I can be part of the team, and all the positives that will come out of that. So, the feeling part of the team, the feeling connected, feeling engaged in the project, contributing, being recognized, right? Because, it's the squeaky wheel that gets the oil, isn't it? So, the person who's talking most gets the most out of stuff. And I think that's really positive. So I would definitely say challenge that belief, because you're not really keeping yourself safe by not saying anything. You're keeping your fear fed. So I would say starve the fear, start speaking out, see what happens, and deal with that as an outcome, definitely.
And I think, as kind of an additional perspective on that, I think, people should avoid saying stuff just for the sake of saying stuff. So you do encounter from time to time people who've clearly, I don't know, watched too many episodes of The Apprentice, and they think that, the way to impress people is by being the dominant voice in the room. And I think, to Steph's point, absolutely, everybody should speak up, and when they have a contribution to make, they should not be afraid to make that contribution. What I would counsel against, though, is don't be the annoying apprentice, because that will also meet with quite a negative reaction. In my experience, on the few times that I have encountered those types of people, usually they lack a lot of self-awareness. They don't read the people who are pulling faces, the people who are shuffling uncomfortably in their seats. They're so busily engaged in their own sort of self-promotion that they kind of miss the cues. So on the one hand, you absolutely don't want people never saying anything. On the other hand, when we're making contributions, let's make them really, really valuable contributions, rather than just contributions for the sake of it.
I think, David, as well, bringing that back to that theme of disappointment, you're absolutely right. I think it's the people who don't have that level of self-awareness who maybe then feel very disappointed and are not quite sure why. Why didn't that go my way? Why didn't that? Because they've missed those cues where maybe the end of a 2-hour meeting wasn't the time to bring up your fresh new idea, or maybe, people are looking at their watches, or they make it very clear they need to go and you're sort of holding them up. So I think that tuning into others' reactions is really crucial, and I think that can help prevent some disappointing reactions or outcomes, for sure.
Yeah, thank you again. And I think obviously we've discussed there quite a lot of disappointment within the workplace, but this next question focuses on how that can affect personal life. So the question really is, essentially it's common for disappointments at work to be translated into personal life, because emotions and feelings and thoughts are obviously not as easy to shut off as a laptop is at the end of the day, and it's not easy to carry these over into the kind of into your home environment. So I think, is there maybe kind of, why does that happen? Is it kind of natural for that to affect your personal life?
Yeah, I mean, it's so natural, right? We're human beings, and as much as we may think of ourselves as having a work self and a home self, ultimately it's the same self. And how annoying that we can't shut our emotions off like a laptop and just go home with a completely powered down version of ourselves, and then reboot at home as this fresh face, whatever, for our family and loved ones and friends who we might be seeing outside of work. So it is a frustration, but it is a fact of life that your emotions will carry with you, and that goes the other way as well. Emotions from home can carry into the workplace and affect how we feel at work. So it's always worth understanding what you're feeling and why, in order to prevent it sort of, if you like, affecting those around you, and being honest about where you are. So if you have had a really difficult day at work and you've had a lot of disappointment, and a lot of you're managing a lot of sadness or a lot of frustration from your day, it's being able to acknowledge that to yourself so that you can be kind to yourself and put in some self-care, but also recognize, am I now the best person to go out and, follow through with all these social plans that I had in place, COVID permitting, but, all these things that I had in place, or do I actually just need to take care of myself this evening because that's now my priority. So I think for me, having good self-care and being able to tune into your emotions regularly, and David hears me talk about this all the time, but I'd say to people, start by stopping. Stop what you're doing and check in with yourself. Are you okay? And are you actually okay? So getting past that knee-jerk reaction of just like, yeah, I'm fine anyway, carry on. And actually, what do I need for myself right now? I think are really important questions to be asking yourself, and you can almost have an end of day checklist into, what's my emotional state? Am I in a safe place to drive home, or do I just need to de-stress for a little while, maybe go for a walk around the block? Just kind of check in with yourself so that you're very aware of the impact the day's had on you, and how you move into the next phase of your day. And I think it's Brendan Burchard who talks about release the tension and set the intention. And he's talking about between meetings, he'll just stop and take a moment to sort of regroup, take a breath, release the tension from that meeting, and then pause and set the intention for the next one before he rushes in. And I definitely adopt that between work and home, particularly now we're working at home, a lot of us, and, remote working. So kind of at the end of the day, just take a few moments to pause, release the tension from the day. Okay, set the intention. What do I want the rest of the evening to be like? So really practical thing to do, but really useful.
Yeah, and something else to sort of reframe is that we used to talk about work-life balance, and everybody was after this elusive balance, getting it right. And to be honest, balance implies taking from something and giving to something else. And really, we should be thinking more about work-life harmonization, because increasingly, and it's been accelerated now through the COVID crisis, that physical separation between home and work is no longer there for a lot of people, and again, it's a kind of a reality that you are who you are, and to try and kind of create a very distinct separation, quite tiring actually. So you have a partner, talk to your partner, and don't box things up entirely, but recognize the need to step back from work and make time for those other things, but trying to kind of ensure that it's all perfectly in balance. I think that's bound to end in disappointment as well.
Yeah, that's all really good stuff there, and that kind of, you've both just touched there on the final question that I had, really, which was essentially, disappointments in the workplace can obviously arise for a variety of reasons, which we've discussed on this call. But and what are the best ways to deal with disappointment? So I know you've touched on a few there, but if there's anything else you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, well, I think really just building on some of the stuff that I said earlier, is learn from it. I mean, whatever you're doing in life, learn from it, and Steph will give you the exact sort of ratio, but for every one negative, it takes 3 or 4 positives to kind of counterbalance that. We do. I'm going to be having my mid-year review shortly, and I know that if there's a negative comment in there, that'll be the one that I remember, rather than all the good stuff. So we have to kind of understand that about ourselves, that we do have this tendency to kind of pick up on the negative stuff and the disappointment, and that can lead to feelings of kind of failure and sort of self-loathing and all that kind of negative and destructive stuff. But actually, first of all, my view, acknowledge that you're going to have disappointments. Of course you are. If you're going to go through life just blissfully, bouncing from success to success, then, I'd love to offer you a job, but I haven't met anybody like that yet. So, be realistic in your expectations. And then when those expectations aren't met, learn from it, go back to it and go, well, okay, well, that didn't work out how I thought it would, or how I'd hoped it would. What can I take from that? I think that's, I forget what the saying is about, history repeating itself and mistakes, repeating themselves. But if we don't learn, then that, I think, is probably the biggest kind of crime in all of that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, so I think a really key point there is, I say, disappointment seems easy to focus on, but, celebrate the good news and the good things that happen as well. I think that is, a really good point you've made there. So that's it for the question. Oh, sorry, go on, Stephanie.
I was just going to add to that, Matt, as well. I think there's just something that I've found really useful, two kind of techniques that I've found really useful for myself. So one is there's a Japanese philosophy of wabi-sabi, which is the acceptance of the imperfectly perfect. So what that means is that we recognize that actually every experience in our life can be seen as good and bad. That, like as David's saying, there's always going to be some disappointment. We don't just, we're not on this trajectory of just permanent success. We're going to have some down days. We're going to have some bumps in the road. And I think one of the things that I really liked was if you imagine that things just sort of gently float along on a river, like life just gently floats along. Where we become uncomfortable is if we get stuck on something, we grip to the reeds on the side, because then the rest of us is kind of trying to be carried along, but we're stuck over here. And so I think, as David said, it's really important when you experience a negative, so a disappointment, just know that you are gently moving away from that. And actually by staying stuck in it and being caught up in the negativity and really getting bogged down in it, actually just focus, learn from it, and accept it as like, actually that's part of the journey. I'm meant to experience those things. They teach me, and they're fantastic learning points. And that level of acceptance of this is meant to happen and it will happen, I think can really help with those tougher times when we feel, if we're trying to scrabble away from something, or if we're clinging on to something, it's like, actually just know that this too shall pass, right? And actually it's far more comfortable to use it to your advantage and get comfortable with those bumps in the roads and see them as opportunities to learn about yourself, about the company, whatever it may be. And just the other thing that's a personal thing that I find really useful and that I practice a lot in clinic is have a self-care list that you write on a day when you're not feeling disappointed or let down in some way. So just have a list, mine's pinned to my fridge, and just have a list of things that make you feel better and that make you look after yourself on days that are a little bit harder going. And the reason I say that is because, as David rightly says, your brain only scans for threat. So when your stress response is activated, or you're feeling a bit disappointed, a bit low in the day, your brain isn't that interested in making you feel better. So you have to work twice as hard. So your brain's not going to give you lots of spontaneous suggestions to feel better. So if you take your brain out of it and you just have a list on the fridge or what have you, or a list in the front of your notebook, whatever it may be, of things that make you feel better, then when you finish a tough day, you're going to finish it with doing something that's good for you, that's part of your self-care, that's taking care of yourself, which is really, really key in a very practical way for dealing with those tougher days. And then the learning and the development can come after that.
Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, that's the end of the questions anyway. So I think we've had some really good discussion today about the topic of dealing with disappointment in professional life, and why it's something that we need to consider and recognise as our just a range of emotions that we experience. I'd like to thank both Stephanie and David for your time, and if you've enjoyed this video, then please look out for other events, including the Paul Stein interview that is available now, and the future Talking Together content that will be addressing those three key themes of loneliness, disappointment and uncertainty as a young professional. So thank you for watching and take care.